I'm going to do a little welcome and housekeeping items before we get to the real beauty of the presentation. As I said, my name is Anna Grace. I support the wonderful work here of the SITES program. It is absolutely my pleasure to welcome you all to our December SITES community call. This is the final event of this year in this series, and we've been really grateful to have so many of our community members join us throughout the year, a year that has looked like no other, I think, fair to say. If you have joined us before, you know that these calls are an important part of our commitment to create a space specifically for our SITES community members dedicated to coming together safely to maintain our connectivity. Today, we will hear in depth about a very unique SITES Platinum project, a lodge at Gulf State Park in coastal Alabama. Our presenters, Rebecca and Kate, hello, who are on video, will share with us the project's compelling history and its many achievements. So I'm really looking forward to it today. So a quick look at our agenda. Thank you, Danielle. After a quick update from Danielle Piranunzi, we'll dedicate the rest of the evening to the project, and we will definitely look for Q&A at the end. So send your questions through the chat box, through the Q&A section below it, whichever avenue you prefer. It's a great opportunity for dialogue, so do send your questions or comments throughout the session. I hope you can also stay tuned at the end. Danielle will share a couple of future events coming up and other ways that you can stay engaged with us. A couple of reminders before we dive in. We are recording the session. Thank you, Paul. We'll be sending it out to all attendees afterwards. And as with previous community calls, the live session is approved for one site-specific CEU. So no need to note down the course details here. They will be included in our materials that we'll send after the session. We'll note it in the chat box for you to jot down if you prefer. And a recording of the session, as with all of our SITES community calls, will be archived on the SITES playlist on USGBC's YouTube channel. So we'll give you a link to that as well. Thank you all again for joining us. I would like to turn it right over to Danielle, who will share a brief SITES update and introduce our wonderful speakers. So Danielle, all yours.
Thanks, Anna Grace and Paul behind the scenes. Hello and welcome everyone. My name again, Danielle Piranunzi. I'm the SITES Program Manager at GBCI. As noted, I will start off with a very brief overview of the SITES program, as the goal of these calls, as Anna Grace has shared, is to provide a platform for leaders and visionaries to showcase SITES projects and share their experience, knowledge, and lessons learned. For those that are new, SITES, since its inception, was developed with rigor and flexibility in mind, applying to a wide variety of project types, sizes, and locations, as you can see from these images. SITES fills an important gap in properly addressing the space outside of and between buildings, yet also for projects with no buildings at all, because while every building has a site, not every site has a building. With that said, SITES and LEAD can be used in tandem, like today's projects that we'll learn about more today. So the main resources for SITES are the SITES V2 rating system and accompanying reference guide shown here. These are a result of over 8 years of research and development, including input from numerous stakeholders, technical advisors, several public comment periods, and insight from a multi-year field test. These documents outline the criteria for guiding and measuring sustainable land design and development. At the same time, we view these as a living document that will evolve over time as research and experience generate more knowledge. And a great way to stay in touch about any of these changes is on these calls, as well as our monthly newsletter, our website, and social media channels. The rating system consists of 18 prerequisites and 48 credits, totaling 200 potential points. Basic certification requires a project to get 70 of those points. And as you can see here, the highest level at Platinum challenges projects to go above and beyond to demonstrate leadership and innovation. In addition to certification, we did formally introduce this year a pre-certification pathway. These are for projects in their planning phases. To date, we have 9 pre-certified projects, mostly in China and Asia. So as noted earlier, SITES applies to a wide variety of projects from government facilities like this recent GSA land port of entry in New Mexico that we just featured on our last community call. That's on the far left, to this transformative urban park in Shanghai, China, in the middle, to public-private projects like the Chicago Navy Pier featured on the far right, and many more. There are roughly 200 registered and certified projects, which are represented in 14 countries, including the US, Canada, China, Japan, Thailand, Argentina, Brazil, Peru, Mexico, Italy, Spain, Greece, and others. In the US, projects are located in 38 US states and Washington, DC. Yet beyond points and credits, SITES was developed to ensure we create places that are designed to be efficient, resilient, and to give back. And in other words, a landscape and outdoor space that appreciates in value and creates a healthy human habitat for all. These landscapes and outdoor spaces fit within the context in terms of climate, ecology, culture, and community. They conserve resources, clean our air and water, enhance well-being, foster resilience, and provide many other essential ecosystem services. The effects of climate change are more obvious every day: record-breaking heat, extreme storms, devastating drought, wildfires, and catastrophic flooding. As the world reckons with how to slow the warming that's driving this changing weather, we're also figuring out how to adapt to it, how to survive it. Investment in nature-based solutions and green infrastructure, which SITES covers, is just that, an investment in our future that will pay off. We must be implementing solutions now, ones that we know can provide these numerous benefits. Much like the pandemic has changed the way we live, climate change is forcing us to change how we think, live, and move forward about a new reality of extreme weather and changing landscapes. Today's project is a prime example of such a thoughtful and effective investment that combines conservation, restoration, and development in a meaningful and very beautiful way that, in their words, maximizes life per square foot. And now I have the honor of introducing our excellent speakers today. Rebecca Dunn Bryant co-founded Watershed in 2008 in order to build expertise around affordable, sustainable building solutions for a hot, humid climate, create built environments that inspire greater connection with the natural world, to perform work in the spirit of collaboration, sharing information with their clients and community. Originally from Alabama, Rebecca moved to Colorado to study sustainable design and social ecology in 1990 and worked in San Francisco and Houston before returning home to get red dirt back at her feet. Passion for sustainable development is focused on sustainable design, construction, and operational strategies for the hot, humid South. While the growing green building movement is international, her approach is decidedly local. That's wonderful. Kate Took is a landscape architect at Sasaki. Her project leadership, strategic thinking, design eye, and technical skills have been instrumental in the success of diverse projects ranging from master planning to site scale work. As a naturally interdisciplinary thinker, she excels at collaborating across disciplines to craft elegant, contextual solutions to complex design challenges. Prior to discovering landscape architecture, Kate was a high school math and physics teacher in the Boston public system. Her passion for inspiring and empowering urban youth infuses her work as a landscape architect. She engages stakeholders in the design of their own urban public spaces through lively workshops. Both will speak about their experience and work on the Gulf State Park Lodge project, which became the first site certified project in the hospitality sector and one of the few Sites Platinum projects in the world. It also achieved LEED and Fortified Commercial certification. It's a great story and truly demonstrates the potential of design and development in creating healthy, safe, and resilient destinations that honors the local culture and community. And now I will pass it to Rebecca to give an introduction. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm waiting for it to flip. Here we go. Okay. Well, we're really excited to participate in this call today. When it was originally scheduled, of course, Hurricane Sally sort of interrupted the first originally scheduled version of this call. So it's been a wonderful opportunity to regroup, and we're delighted to speak about this project at Gulf State Park. Kate, thank you for introducing Kate and I, our roles on this project. Kate was the landscape architect with Sasaki, and also Sasaki led the master planning effort for the Gulf State Park project. She'll go into the structure of the project and all the different roles, but that gives you a taste of how she was involved. And Watershed, we were the Gulf Coast Sustainability specialist for the master planning team, and then the design teams for the different built aspects of the Gulf State Park project. Honestly, it was an honor to be a part of this tremendously talented and large team. We were having fun filling out this page of all the different great firms that were involved in the Gulf State Park project. At one point, in the heart of the project, when the different built elements were underway, Kate reminded me that there were over 200 consultants involved in this project. So it was really, we had a great brain trust contributing to the success. So today, you know, we're going to, Kate, well, just to run through our agenda, Kate will orient everyone with an overview of the master plan that guided both the lodge and the other projects at Gulf State Park. And then I'll speak to why, the kind of why and how of sites, the value it brought to the project and how we applied it. And then kind of the heart of the matter, Kate will go into the site design and how sites was applied and the beautiful results. And then we have some lessons learned pro tips and an update post Hurricane Sally to kind of give a snapshot of where how the lodge has, how our resilience strategies are put to the test.
Excellent. Thanks, Rebecca. So we're going to fly through this piece on the master plan just to give a little bit of context. I know many of you on the call may be familiar with the Gulf Coast of Alabama, and many of you may not. It's really a gem, and it's sort of exciting to share a little bit about Alabama and the exciting pieces of Gulf State Park before we dive in to the specifics of the lodge. So I think this diagram is really intended to share a little bit about the background, why there was a master plan for Gulf State Park and why there was money available for pretty immediate implementation of many of the pieces of that master plan. So two things set the stage. There were two hurricanes, which were a dead hit on Gulf State Park and the Gulf Coast region in 2004 and 2005. Hurricane Ivan destroyed huge pieces of the park and the previous lodge that was there since the 1970s. That combined with, in 2010, the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, which really devastated the Gulf Coast economy for many months, if not a year, and really resulted in an influx of funding and early restoration dollars, which the state of Alabama took a hard look and said, you know, really we need to think about how to spend that money on reviving the Gulf Coast, and Gulf State Park should really be the recipient of a lot of that money as an economic engine for the Gulf Coast region. So that brought about the master planning process, which was really designed to think about how to spend that money, how to invest wisely in creating an environmental economy that could be an engine for the region and prove how resilient design could transform the region. And then there are a series of implementation projects that came out of that. Before the master plan team was involved, there were really three main drivers, right? We have this trifecta of storms, economics, and the environment, which really inform this region and informs the plan. You have a need to be resilient, both from an environmental standpoint and an economic standpoint, and you have an incredible environmental resource to take advantage of. So right as we were getting involved as a master plan team, the team set forth a vision that Gulf State Park will be an international benchmark for economic and environmental sustainability, demonstrating best practices for outdoor recreation, education, and hospitable accommodations, right? So right off the bat, you can see that the aspirations were high and that it was baked in that this would be both an environmental and an economic example of sustainability, not just for the Gulf Coast, but internationally. So high aspirations really baked in here. I think this is an important park. I think there are times when people have called this a state park that really feels like a national park. It has a national draw to it. So people are coming from all over the state of Alabama, but really all over the country. Snowbirds fly down here and spend the winter. And it has a huge draw because it's Alabama's window on the Gulf. It's really this incredible perch with which to experience the beach and the Gulf. And at the same time, Gulf State Park has long been an economic engine for the rest of the state park system. So the funds generated by the draw there really go back and fund the rest of the state park system and the many rich resources that Alabamans enjoy. So it's a really important piece. As a master planning team, we did a really robust and intensive outreach process. We reached people from all over the country, really, who enjoy this park and understood what their top priorities are. And I think it became really clear to us down here at the bottom that the key priority was balancing any new development that happened in the park with the park's natural character and using that natural character as an inspiration and a driver for any potential new development, which would be an important part of that economic engine piece. So as a master planning team, we came up with 4 guiding principles, and those guiding principles are here. really restoring the environment as a primary driver, and making sure that learning could happen everywhere and all the time, so that the environment was used as a tool for promoting stewardship and outdoor learning. Improving mobility across the park. This is a 6,000-acre park, and there were just a few trails when we came on, and so the idea was that you could, park once and really explore the full potential of the park on foot or on bicycle, and then ensuring that there was an incredible visitor experience. So this is really about hospitality. So this is a master plan diagram. You can see it's color-coded by elements that were considered phases 1, 2, and 3. So in red, those are phase 1. And then there's a check mark by the things that are complete. So I think it's rare as a landscape architect or a designer in general that you get a chance to do a master plan and then so immediately have an incredible resource of implementation dollars to start right away. And I think that was the incredible power of this team that Rebecca talked about, that we were planning and then immediately we had the resources to implement. So you can see there were 5 projects in phase 1 and all of those have been implemented. And you can see that several parts of phase 2 that have also been implemented, some of the pedestrian bridge connections and the conversion of some roads into trails. So an incredible opportunity to plan and then implement right away. These are just some of the renderings from the master plan highlighting the idea around mobility, that this is a park that you park once and explore and have a lot of opportunities to really engage with the park. The ideas around interpretation and a really immersive experience where people can arrive and really understand what it means to steward a dynamic dunescape, as well as the 6,000 acres of parkland, wetland mostly behind that. And then finally, the reimagining of a pretty static resource, public golf course, into something that we called a park adventure lawn. I want to emphasize that this master plan effort was really the kickoff of that implementation effort. So you can see here, this is the master plan, this little bump here, where way back in 2013, where most of that effort took place, the public feedback, the process of visioning and creating that overall framework, which would guide the implementation. And you can see that the implementation took place over the following 5 years, with design kind of constant throughout that and management throughout that. And then the bulk of construction occurring between 2017 and 2019. So really a tremendous effort, over 200 design consultants, a tremendous team from contractors to the state providing resources for this project. So 3 signature elements opened in 2018, and those are pictured on the screen. And so we're going to talk today mostly about the Lodge, which achieved LEED Gold, Sites Platinum, and certified commercial. But there were 2 other really important built elements, in addition to the trail system and other smaller implementation pieces, the dune restoration, that are also, I think, an important part of the story. And it's really the master plan's goal really set the framework for all of these signature elements to achieve new standards in green. Rebecca can jump in and talk a little bit more about why this was such an important part of the story and so monumental for the state of Alabama.
Great. Okay, so jumping into the opportunity with sites at Gulf State Park, and I mean, as Kate goes through those slides, it just reminds me how many stories are embedded in this project, and I hope people will type in questions. If we hit on something quickly you'd like to hear more about, please do jump in, as we would love to speak to it, but we could have a whole full day workshop on these projects. So the opportunity with sites, to step back, many people don't even know that Alabama has a Gulf Coast. And if they do, they just think of beaches or the Redneck Riviera. But we're a tremendously biodiverse place. And, this is part of the North American Coastal Plain that was recently designated an international biodiversity hotspot for both the ecological richness and the level of threat facing it. So it was tremendously important to respect that and restore that. And then looking at the culture of this place as well, Gulf Shores evolved from a fishing-based economy. And then after Hurricane Frederick sort of wiped it out in 79, it rebuilt with condos and more of a tourism-based economy. But it wasn't until the oil spill 10 years ago that the community had sort of a reckoning and a realization that that economy is completely dependent on the health of the ecosystems of the area. And if those are damaged, the tourists go away. And it was a real paradigm shift. And that awakening was sort of the opportunity that this project aims to capitalize on. And it was the opportunity where sites was such a good fit. So kind of bouncing around a little bit, the bridge between the master plan and the lodge and sites was really this integrated design charrette. So we gathered the lodge team to try to translate this broad vision and want to create an international benchmark of economic and environmental sustainability. Well, how do we do that with this building and this site? And we ended up with a report of hundreds of strategies that we were targeting, but they could be boiled down to, I think, in this one goal that emerged, let's maximize life per square foot. So just the overarching focus on restoring habitat and then restoring humans into that habitat. So all of our other focuses, even the way we looked at energy savings, also had to do with the quality of habitat for people and the visitor experience. So even with resilience, we're looking at restoring ecosystems as a resilient strategy, which is not the first. Normally people think of structure. We need to build a fortress. That was sort of our third tier. Restoring ecosystems was maybe the first tier, and then even the ways that we thought about the visitor experience of the lodge with passive systems to create thermal comfort. That also allows you to survive. If you have daylighting and passive strategies to achieve thermal comfort, then you have a habitable building after a storm, even if you don't have power. So the resilient strategies were more softer and more ecosystem-based than you see in typical projects. So pulling together, because we're managing such an ambitious vision and so many different projects, it was important to sort of focus our efforts. So we evaluated many different rating systems that the project could go after, and we really zeroed in on sites initially because it hit that sweet spot between human habitat and ecological habitat. It was very important to the owner to achieve ambitious goals with these rating systems. It was seen, and they had the data and studies to back it up, that if you achieve Living Building Challenge, if you achieve Site Platinum, if you achieve LEED Gold, if you really break new ground with these rating systems, that in it of itself will drive ecotourism. And they also were a very important part of balancing the competing demands to restore the ecosystems and restore people to the ecosystems. So sites hit that sweet spot. This breakdown shows kind of the yin and the yang of how sites and LEED work together for us. Along the bottom, these are our areas of focus from the integrated design charrette, and then how the credits we pursued in these rating systems aligned with those goals. And you see that the strong focus of sites on land, site, and water, balancing the energy, light, and air, the building focus of LEED, but also that within both rating systems, there are sort of equally strong emphasis on materials, health, mobility, and education, which are really important goals to us. Just to touch on the intersection between these, we started before the LEED Site Synergy document had been created and sort of explored how those synergies might play out. And in the end, it was even better than we had hoped. But we're looking at around 200 points that were being managed between these rating systems at about a 20% overlap. About 39 points were strong synergies between the two systems. Okay, so what does that mean in terms of sites? And I apologize, I'm kind of zooming through here with an eye of getting to the design part with Kate, because that's the really exciting part. But I'm happy to answer any detailed site questions at the end. I'll skip over some of those details. What we started to understand as the team, got to know sites, and understood how it was different than LEED. So instead of thinking about water, for example, as one category of effort, with sites, we looked at all the different ecosystems, whether we're looking at vegetation, soils, water flows. You have a similar strategy where you protect the ecosystem services being provided on the site by intact areas. You control and manage threats to those areas, in our case from invasive plants and from human disruption. Then you look at restoration and maximizing the abundance and biodiversity and ecosystem services of those areas, and then you connect people back into those systems for, whether it's restoration or social connection. And then, maybe the most important part where the sites team is now at the Lodge is then you adapt your maintenance towards continuing that abundance and continuing the vitality of those systems, and you monitor and report performance to ensure that continued abundance. So that was a broad view, but the other lens through which we sort of approached all of the site's credits was taken from the one credit for designing functional stormwater systems as an amenity, and this is a snapshot of the constructed wetland and a rain chain that helped to convey stormwater that Kate will show in more detail. But that approach, so why can't all of our resilience strategies also be an amenity, as I mentioned? Why can't conservation be an amenity? And so, when we recovered condensate for our HVAC system to fill the pool, for example. This is a hospitality project, and key to making that connection between economic restoration and ecological restoration is that the ecological restoration has to engage the visitor and enhance their experience. So that is addressed directly by sites more so than any other rating system, and it was a really great fit for that reason. And so just kind of sum it all up, this is one of the educational signs in the park that looks at the gopher tortoise, which is not found on this beachfront site, but is found throughout the site, throughout the park proper. And the gopher tortoise builds a nice habitat for itself. It builds this nice accommodating burrow, and then it shares it with other species. So that became kind of a model for us, that we could restore and this wonderful habitat and then invite people into the habitat as well. So I'll use that to turn it over to Kate to talk about how the design embodies that gopher tortoise model of Southern hospitality.
Absolutely. Thanks, Rebecca. So this is one of the funnest parts. I think we started, as Rebecca said, with this integrated design charrette, which was really the entire Lodge design consultant team coming together and brainstorming big picture goals. Underpinning all of that was a site analysis, which I'll share with you just a little bit of. I think I want to address this question right off the bat. People often ask, well, why is the Lodge on dunes? Isn't that an unsustainable place to build at all, right? And I think it was a question we asked ourselves at the very beginning of the master plan. When we came to the project, there was actually already a permitted site for rebuilding the Lodge on the same footprint as an original Lodge had existed. So this is just showing some images of that original Lodge up at the top. In January 2004, just before Hurricane Ivan hit, you can see that Lodge was really spread out. There was sort of a central piece and then a number of rooms which spread out right along the face of what's called the primary dune, so right at the edge of the beach. It was very forward on that. It had sort of a standard turf landscape, and it was sort of old-style construction. Along came Hurricane Ivan and really just washed that whole structure away. Because it was sitting right there on the primary dune, it was very vulnerable, and it just got completely wiped away. So you can see where that sits on that primary dune. And you can see that really spread out. It was, over 30 acres of impact on the dunescape. And so the new site, which was permitted, again, before we got involved in the master plan, was just 21 acres. So it was a little bit smaller in terms of footprint and came all the way back to the Perdido Beach Highway. As a master planning team, we spent a lot of time understanding the ecology of the whole park. So the beachfront is a really important part of the park. It's a driver for why people come, but there's actually 6,000 acres behind that. It includes evergreen forests, maritime forests, some of the most kind of special ecosystems of the Gulf Coast, open water, freshwater systems, fresh and salt marshes, coastal swales, a lot of wetland area. And so the ecological diversity and richness really informed, well, how do we think about what that means right there on the dunes, and how do we think about development in the dunes, because this area between the highway and the beach is dunes, and that was what was permitted for the lodge. So we spent a lot of time understanding with a consultant, Biohabitats, understanding what an ideal dune system really should be. The diagram on the bottom here is vertically exaggerated, so it's showing you a little bit more topography than you would actually see, but the idea that there's growing dunes, the primary dune, which is a really important first buffer, and then a series of secondary dunes, which include both high and low points, swales they're called, wet or dry, and then the tertiary dunes, so things are getting higher and higher as you go kind of deeper inland. And the idea is that this is a dynamic system. So we looked a lot at kind of what was going on with the system as it existed. After Hurricane Ivan, the Army Corps of Engineers came and they put an engineered berm right at the back of the beach. And that berm was great in terms of flood protection, but what happened was it was blocking sand from blocking the wind from bringing sand further into the system. So the dunes were not growing as they should. And there was sort of a static situation behind that primary dune. So we worked with a number of coastal scientists as well as local engineering teams to understand what happened if you try to make that dune system a little bit more dynamic. We cut a series of cuts into that engineered berm, and we put the plug of sand in front on the beach side and allowed the wind to do the work of building the secondary dune system and really adding sand to that system, making it more dynamic. This was all part of a restoration effort that was happening while the design process for the lodge was going on. So really building that secondary dune system, making it diverse and robust and dynamic as part of a flood protection system, but also habitat. And the result is a sort of deeper, healthier dune system with many different opportunities, high and low points, areas where sand is moving to and from, lots of planting to hold and stabilize that sand in place. And the result, has been pretty profound in using these cuts to fuel and feed a deeper, more diverse dune system. So what does that mean in terms of where the lodge was built? So the lodge permit comes all the way to the beach highway. It's really between the primary dune and the Perdido Beach Boulevard. And what we did is we analyzed the dune growth and the movement of the shoreline over time to understand how much space do the dunes really need to grow and to move and to be dynamic before you put a static building in that space. And the recommendation of the team of engineers was really that you push development off that primary dune by 225 feet. And you can see in the site plan where that puts development. So this is the primary dune line in dashed. The red is the old lodge where that sat, pretty much right on the primary dune line. And then this blue dotted line is that 225 feet. And so we set that as a guideline for the design, that no development should be in front of that 225-foot line to allow for really great, healthy dune restoration in front of the lodge. I think this was a really important driver. Rebecca noted, that we were interested in maximizing life per square foot. We were really conscious of several endangered species that nest in this area, that use this area as part of their primary habitat. The Alabama beach mouse is probably the cutest endangered species you can imagine. It makes its home only in the Gulf Coast of Alabama. So really just has a few miles, 11 miles of coastline to call home, and has been really endangered. And so the idea was that we really maximize the opportunity for the Alabama beach mouse, and several of the other species will come with that. The lodge design used an entirely native plant palette, and that's an important part of nourishing and feeding that natural system of fauna that we were trying to promote, providing great sources of food that naturally should be there in order to really promote the kind of life that we were looking to provide great habitat for. And again, all of that, the beach mouse eats seeds of dune grass, plants them essentially, and then allows that dune grass to grow. So it's this like really interesting symbiotic relationship where dunes grow better when they provide great habitat for the beach mouse. I wanted to end the design section, just this moment of opening the lodge was really profound, not just for the design team and for the many excited visitors to the lodge that were excited to start coming and enjoying this environmental resource, this ecotourism resource on the Gulf Coast, but also really for the state of Alabama. This was a point of great pride to have a CITES Platinum certified landscape and LEED Gold certified building. Really the first of its kind in the nation, but really an important first for Alabama as well. This is a state that historically had not, for a wide variety of reasons, been able to embrace green building, and so it was a real milestone to be able to open this building and share it with the public.
Well, and even at the onset of this project, we were struggling, like many states that had a large timber industry, with an anti-LEED bill that had been passed that prohibited public funds from being used for sustainable projects. So it was really a significant paradigm shift to go from that edict issued from a past governor to marking the point at which our governor first used the word sustainability in a positive way, to this new awareness where people were bragging about the sustainable accomplishments of the lodge. And I forgot to mention, as you were talking about the endangered species at the lodge, in the beginning with the master plan, when Kate showed all of the respondents to these surveys, an interesting pattern that emerged is that they roughly follow the Mississippi flyway. If you overlay them, they look very similar. And while we had over 2 million people visit the Gulf State Park annually, but over 2 billion birds migrate through the Gulf Coast of Alabama. So anyway, interesting synergies there.
Yeah, so we're going to try and move a little more quickly, I think. We have just, 20 minutes or so left. We want to leave some time for questions. So we'll fly through the next little bit, but we wanted to share a little bit with you about what some of the design principles were and how those were achieved in the built landscape. So this is a collection of principles and the built work photos just showing how the final result really achieved the goals we set out that Rebecca described in the integrated design charrette. The goal was to have a resilient building that felt nestled in the dunes. And I think, that was achieved in a number of ways. 16 feet was the lowest building elevation that was driven by FEMA to provide flood protection for the building. But the way the grading works, the grade really comes up to that 16 feet, and the feeling is that the building is nestled into a dune system that is growing. So it's kind of a nice and exciting way to see that happen. The dunes were restored with 100% native species. And really have welcomed back a wide variety of flora and fauna, which is pretty exciting to see. I think that, we were always interested in providing a tactile experience within the growing dunescape. So I think, sometimes, especially at the ribbon cutting, some of the pictures of the dunes were a little rough, actually. People looked at them and were like, is this plants or is this weeds? And I think the reason for that is that it just takes a long time for a dunescape to get established, but it also takes sort of a different mindset. This is not a manicured hotel landscape. This is a dunescape, and you're being welcomed into that dunescape to enjoy a stay at the lodge at Gulf State Park. And I think we wanted it to feel that way. We wanted to provide opportunities for people to get right up and close and personal with that dunescape, but also to be clear that it was growing and moving and sacred space that you don't step in, you just enjoy and see. You can see here there's a monarch butterfly, and this is a major landing spot for migrating monarchs at certain times of year. So it was really important. There were a couple of pieces of vegetation that we chose to work around and have remain on site. These are 2 stands of sand live oaks that were mature and that had survived Hurricane Ivan, and that we wanted to preserve and be part of the landscape. So the lodge was really designed around some of these vegetation and soil protection zones, and really they remain a really important part and focal point of the lodge landscape. I think, this piece of habitat, you can see the monarch butterfly here. It's really important to note that, the landscape is starting to grow into itself. we protected the beach mouse. When we went under construction, we took all the beach mice out of the site to ensure that none were damaged during the construction process. And it's been fascinating when that construction fence came down, just how quickly the beach mice came back and made this habitat theirs again. You can see here a hole. They're all over the dunes now, and their little footmarks are all over, and you can see that they're actively contributing to creating that dynamic dunescape. Turtle-friendly lighting was also a really important part of the lodge design to ensure that there was lighting that was safe for the community members using the lodge, but also that that was safe for the turtles, that wouldn't get confused when they come to nest in the dunes.
The Fish and Wildlife Service said that this was the best example they've seen nationwide of turtle-friendly lighting. So the lodge employees are very proud of that, and it's an educational point for sure.
Yep. Yeah. It was a part of the program required by Hilton, who operates the hotel, or sorry, who is the brand behind the hotel, that there be a pool. And so I think we worked really hard as a design team to figure out how to have that pool not just be your average pool surrounded by a fence, but instead be part of that dunescape and part of that experience. So there's an infinity edge that really connects you to the dunes. There's fencing that is required around a pool, but the hope was that that becomes part of the dune system over time and becomes kind of sand fences that help to catch the sand and keep it in place and grow the dunes. And then some sort of whimsical features that help to ground the pool in the dunescape. I think, when I have visited since the lodge has opened, it's really an incredible place to sit on that porch and feel like you are one with the dunes. There's sort of a moment where you can kind of like step down and find an inner quiet in the way that the wind works. You can actually see the dunes growing and moving. You can see how the grasses are growing in over time. And that kind of view of nature is one of the most important drawing features of the lodge. Rebecca mentioned about celebrating stormwater and, using that as a functional site amenity that people can really enjoy and explore. And I think the design does that in a number of ways and then interpret how that is done. So using signage in a really careful way, as well as really exciting celebratory features like the one that captures and transfers stormwater down into a swale, which eventually goes down into a wetland, which is all part of that experience in the landscape. I think we talked a little bit about, sharing that story. The signage campaign was meant not to be super didactic, but instead ask a lot of questions and get people thinking and talking to each other about what the experience of the landscape really is, and planting just tidbits that help them deepen their understanding of the landscape they're moving through. And then finally, this is from the park and the expanded trail system. And thinking about, it was really an important part of the lodge design process to connect with the rest of the master plan, which was restoring trails and providing other amenities and resources throughout the park to enjoy and expand that opportunity of ecotourism. And so we're connecting to 13 miles of new trails. There are several pedestrian bridges for Perdido Beach Boulevard, which was previously a really inhospitable place for pedestrians, now has become something that you can just move over and explore the rest of the park. So, Rebecca, will you take us through some of the site tips?
Sure. I'll try to see if I can touch on these questions that were asked while we get into it. Just to touch briefly, though, on the process and how we managed 3 certifications on a large team that was actually a large project. It was built in different bid packages. We did have Watershed served as the sustainability consultant and led the effort with the design team primarily. So we were responsible for, taking all of those goals embedded in the design charrette and the master plan and translating them to credits, then communicating the credit requirements to the design team, managing the documentation. Then Volker and Skanska were the team that managed the construction management team. And so they had a sustainability point person who led the effort through construction, through the pre-bid, pre-construction, the site punch list, and managed that effort. And then Valor Hospitality was hired on towards the end of the project, which is a challenge in and of itself to not have them from the beginning, and took the sustainable maintenance and monitoring forward. I will say the fact that these were not just handoffs, that there was continuity between those phases was really important to the success. was more of a tapering yin-yang effort between phases than a complete handoff. Okay, so some other sort of challenges, specific details with sites. It was really interesting applying site soils credit to a sandy dunescape. And when we started this project, we thought this is probably a complete aberration, because most site projects have soils where you just add some organic matter until the soil and it's restored. But since then, the last community call, there was a desert project. We're working on another project that's primarily rock. So it really it takes some analysis and some interpretation to understand what soil characteristics are essential to the success of your landscape. And in this case, it wasn't as much organic matter in the dunes as it was getting those plants to survive so they could hold the soil and then over time create a little organic matter. But the dunescape, it was more plant survivability, and having an absorbent gel medium with some nutrients was the most critical part, rather than sand amendment. The wetlands was another story, because it was more about organic matter. But another lesson learned is that in the bid process, public bid process, people are not used to reading soil specifications. So that has to be made very, very explicit. There's a learning curve. There's a lot on this, but let's go to the other ones to see. The other challenges, again, it was a public bid project on a very tight timeline because of the nature of this grant. Plants were planted in August, so in the sand.
Without an irrigation system.
Yeah, with no, on the integrated design charrette, we all dreamed of collecting stormwater for an irrigation system. In the end, it was, the VE resulted in a landscape that doesn't need irrigation, but it could have used some irrigation to get started. And I don't know that the temporary irrigation was really provided in the kind of way that would have best helped these plants.
Yeah.
So maybe more detail on warranty period or more specified warranty periods might, have helped us with that. With the public bid project, I suspect we just had the challenges we had. Yeah. Well, and this is our detailed grading plan that was amazing, but very difficult to, not difficult. What happens is you do this grading, and then you wait to plant plants, and then you plant the plants, and they're not large enough to hold the plants. So in this kind of environment, electric leaf blowers and sand moving equipment becomes an important part of their maintenance, because until that vegetation is established, it's going to move. And that's been an interesting part of their ongoing sustainable site maintenance plan, is adapting to changing dunes.
And the way the stormwater system was meant to work, when they did rough grading before they planted the plants, the sand all moved around and they didn't regrade back to that space. And so I think there just have been ongoing challenges with ensuring that the drainage system works the way it was designed to work. And it has to be dynamic and has to adapt constantly.
Good point. Well, and the wetlands we had to go back and enlarge the wetlands again, right, because the slope of the wetlands, the amount of wetlands we were restoring shrunk as the sand shifted, and it had to be pulled back out and reestablished. Yeah. So it has been done and it's been successful, but it is a challenge. And then the sustainable site maintenance plan is great that is included in sites, and that really helps to make that happen. But the park as a whole is still looking for grant funding and training to more robustly apply their sustainable maintenance across the whole park. The neat thing is they're trying to use the lessons that they learn through sites to apply sustainable maintenance to the whole park, and ideally to the Alabama's park system. We can just flip through these slides pretty quickly just to show, so everybody really understands this. On September 16th, this is the anniversary of Hurricane Ivan. Hurricane Sally hit us and was supposed to be a 1, and ended up, more like a 2. Some people wanted to make it a 3, but for 12 hours, it was going about 2 or 3 miles per hour. For 12 hours, we were hit with over 100 mile per hour winds, and it just sat on us. So if you go to the next slide, this is what was happening in front of Gulf State Park at our pier. And this is exactly how the previous lodge got wiped out. So this drone footage shows, this was taken the day after the hurricane. It shows on the left, Lake Shelby is not supposed to be in that area. And then our wetlands on the right of the beach highway are full. But you see, the vegetation has grown in at the lodge, and it's largely, everything is in place. Our pervious parking area is full of water, and then it did its job and drained. So, the right side of the beachside highway is looking pretty good. And let's see, keep going. And when you got up to the lodge, this is a few weeks after the hurricane, where the vegetation had established looked amazing. You see our hand sanitizers all to the right, so COVID adaptation as well. The next slide, flip through these. The vegetation soil protection zones, the remnant dunes, and then the next one. This is the beach mouse habitat, the restored behind the primary dune. The engineered berm that Kate mentioned is on the left. Beyond that, you can see a piece of the pier that is no longer here, that got completely wiped out. But the vegetation beyond that, the primary dune held and really protected the site, the site of the lodge from this wave action. In Ivan, all this was wiped out, and there were no more beach mice in Alabama after Ivan. They had to bring in beach mice and repopulate. They haven't done a habitat survey yet, but all evidence shows that the beach mice took refuge and survived. The dune looks great from this side, but if you see the other side, it took a beating. So this is that engineered berm that is the primary dune. This is where the lodge would have been if the team hadn't taken the time to analyze the ideal location for a resilient lodge. This is why the other lodge was destroyed. And so going forward, this will sort of soften, but as the beach gets renourished, it may also, that berm may be renourished, and the push and pull between how high to make it, how to feed sand into the secondary dunes will be an important part of their ongoing maintenance. I took this a few weeks ago because it just made me happy to see part of the ongoing dune restoration effort that by park employees is a Christmas tree dune fencing initiative. And volunteers use these Christmas trees as sand fences. And after the hurricane, some of them were knocked loose, and so these visitors have set up their own little Christmas tree to enjoy the Gulf. So it kind of shows you the resilience of, human spirit as well as the dunes. So we've left a few minutes for questions, not quite as many as we'd hoped.
That was wonderful. That was wonderful. Thank you. We got a number of great comments from people, bunches of questions. So let me just dive in with some of those. For one of the first ones was, why were there 200 consultants on this one project? That seemed to be an enormous amount.
I think we should have clarified that it's not just one park project. There's a master plan, there was the lodge, there was the interpretive center, there was the learning campus, and there was a trails project, which included interpretive signage. And so when you added up all of the consultants working on all of those separate teams, Rebecca and I worked on many of those teams, but many of the teams had consultant teams that were entirely separate from another. So it was a tremendous effort. I mean, the state was really running 5 different projects at the same time.
Well, and then they had parallel initiatives with art and looking for cultural resources across the entire park. We didn't even touch on the art initiatives inside the lodge, where it's showcasing Alabama art and ecologically focused art. So And there were lots of educational initiatives as well. So.
Yeah, and recreational initiatives that we're partnering with this as well. So how do you improve recreation opportunities within the park, which is separate from the design question, but still part of the consultant team operations.
Talk with us a little bit more about the maintenance challenges and the need to seek grant funding. That's an issue with a lot of projects, right? There's a focus early on and initially on funding, on bond funding in particular, or the funding you had here, but then maintaining afterwards is a challenge. So tell us about that.
Well, the grant funding is not in particular for the lodge maintenance, but the park would like to codify. The master plan included recommendations for sustainable maintenance across the entire park, and the park staff wanted to really take that to the next level. They wanted to implement a more robust composting program and tie it to education. So the grant funding was for the whole park with the thought that it may also be able to be translated, create a model for all Alabama parks.
Yeah, I would add that this is a unique situation in that there is an operations agreement for the lodge as a hospitality entity, and that the organization that operates the lodge is called Valor, and their agreement includes maintenance of the park as part of the resources that are available to guests at the lodge. And so they also operate and maintain the interpretive center and the learning campus, the restaurant associated with the learning campus. They are responsible for maintenance of the trail system as well and any updates to interpretive signage. So they have quite an agreement in partnership with the state park in terms of maintenance of the park. And I think that that's gone a long way. They have a real vested interest in ensuring a well-maintained park.
Well, and that was one of the key paradigm shifts, right? Because the previous lodge was not just destroyed because Ivan hit it. It was destroyed because for years the Alabama legislature had sort of robbed the funds from the Gulf State Park to fund other state initiatives, and money was always being funneled out and not sent back for maintenance. And so with this project, one of the goals was to ensure the sustainability of the project.
And how did sites help with that? What were some of the other benefits about how it ensured the integrity of this project after the fact?
Well, I mean, during construction, the lodge was built over a kind of a three-phase construction process. There were three different bids. And like many publicly bid state-funded projects, by the time that final bid came around, there was a need for really intensive value engineering, and what was in that final package was the site. So structure had already been bid. There were some sort of substantial building packages that had already happened, and the site was on the chopping block. And sites, because of the owner's sincere desire to achieve sites platinum, it was not an option to cut any of the sustainable features. And I think that having sites as a motivator for the owner to make hard decisions was really valuable in terms of ensuring that the project could still meet sites platinum and the goals of sustainability that had been set, despite a really painful value engineering process. And I think there are some things that, have resulted in terms of maintenance that have been hard to witness as a result. There were some things that, that happened in that value engineering process that now require maintenance. And I think they're recognizing that, and Valor, the operator, is stepping up to help.
Well, and I would say the structure of the sustainable maintenance plan and those requirements, how they tie back to all these individual sites credits, was a great educational tool to have to sit down with with Valor and with their maintenance team and sort of talk through those and let things come to the surface that and be memorialized that could have devolved if it had just been handed off without the process of creating that plan. It's a hotel, and they kind of operate in that like emergency mentality. Everybody's on all the time. And so very easily, the good intentions entropy could have occurred in the maintenance, but instead they really did the work on low emitting maintenance equipment and green cleaners, and they've they've committed, through the challenges.
Well, great. On that note, we're running out of time, so I'm going to turn it back over to Danielle. We've got some unanswered questions, which Rebecca and Kate, we hope if we get to you by email, you can help answer, and we can send those responses out to people who joined us today. But thank you so much. Danielle?
Sure thing.
Yes, thank you, Rebecca and Kate. That was amazing. And yeah, we could dedicate a whole day to that project. It's really wonderful. But we are wrapping up, and I just want to highlight some upcoming events. In February and April, we have the upcoming community calls to put that into your calendar. The topic will be water in February, and the topic will be carbon in April. We'll have details to follow soon. We do want to encourage everybody about our Sites Community Partner Program, which you can find on our website if you are interested. And again, the Sites AP exam is available online for anyone who is interested. Again, thank you so much for attending and your time today. Thank you for our excellent speakers, Kate and Rebecca, and our site staff, Anna Grace and Paul in the background, for their excellent support as well. So everybody have a great day, happy holidays, and see you in the new year.